Hi, and welcome to From the Stands. It's week 6 of college football, and we're so excited to have you with us. If you're new to From the Stands, we're a college football show for fans from fans. I want to give a huge shout out to anyone joining us for the first time from the subreddit. As you may or may not know, this show was born on the subreddit, so it's really exciting to be able to contribute and offer up our awful analysis and commentary to the community. Joining me this week, we'll go around the horn. Dick, start us off. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, my name is Dick. I'm a VaTech Saggy, class of 2018, and drinking Shiner Oktoberfest right now.
Rock on, JJ.
I'm JJ Apostolico. I'm from Nazareth, Pennsylvania, which is just outside Philadelphia. 2018 alum of Penn State. Looking forward to talking some football with you guys.
Yeah, and I'm Will Rainier, a diehard Oklahoma State fan living under duress in Austin, Texas. If you've never watched the show, here's how it works. We're going to break down each time slot with two things. We're going to give you a shot and a chaser. These are the two games in each slot that you should be watching. In between those, we've got some games, a breakdown of the week's biggest stories, and even a couple of seconds set aside for the Pac-12, my least favorite conference. So, JJ, why don't you tell people where they can find us throughout the show or throughout the week?
Yeah, so if you guys want to watch the show, you can find us on YouTube at From the Stands. All of our shows from past weeks are posted there, as well as the show from this week. And you can also find us on Twitter, live tweeting throughout Saturday, along with all of you at From the Stands US. It's a good follow, I promise.
Absolutely. And we've got some really exciting news. Dick, why don't you tell people about what's going on next week?
Okay, so for the Red River Shootout, also known as the most relevant game every year in college football, we're trying our absolute best to try to do something very special for the 10 or 12 people out there watching From the Stands on a religious basis.
We're trying to our mothers.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to have a live show in Dallas, but there's a but here. We need your help. Yeah. So if there's anyone in the Dallas area that has a camera, any kind of film experience, anything like that, we'd really love your help. Hell, even if you have a cool-looking garage that we can film in, even better.
Guys, this is no joke, right? We are credentialed media to the Texas State Fair.
Oh, God, they made a mistake.
They have given us free reign to come in and film throughout the day. They're letting us shoot a live episode right there on the fairground. We're legit. Like, this is actually happening. So if you want to be a part of that, we'd love to have you. Any guys with streaming experience, like you said, camera people, or if you just want to come and check out the show, like, we'd be stoked to have you come and be a part of it. So what do you guys say we get into it?
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, kind of a weird week in college football. Not really a lot of movement up and down. But here's what I'm wondering. After last week in college football, which teams are you saying are dead? Which ones are coming back to life? And which ones have we just kind of ignored and forgotten about throughout the season? Dick, start us off.
Well, I'm going to start with what was really the impetus for this segment is Maryland. And Mikey, I'm not going to steal all your thunder here. But I don't think I've ever seen a team have such a rise to glory in 2 games and then just immediately burn out.
You're welcome, everybody.
It's really, really impressive. Just how Mike Loxley got everything going, and then it just grinded such a substantial halt.
Absolutely.
And the strength the schedule wasn't there to begin with, so it makes you wonder, where were we, the American people, in letting Maryland get so carried away?
Guys, you remember
there's that one article that came out that this national media guy from the D.C. area is like, Michael Loxley, I'm sorry, I was wrong about you. Well, maybe you were right.
Guys, how about the time they brought in like 1,000 temporary bleachers so they could back out the Friday night game?
Just so that Penn State student section could get voted the student section of the week.
That's right,
Maryland.
On the road. Oh, gosh. Oh, that's worse.
So here's a question for you. What's more embarrassing 10 years from now? I'd want to say Frosted Tips in the early 2000s or the hype around Maryland right now. Or 2 weeks ago.
Lack thereof now.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people that were really scared of Maryland, like some of our fans included, that were scared of Maryland before the Temple game, and that didn't turn out. We were happily wrong, but.
Oh, gosh. Dick, why don't you tell me, give me a team who's coming back to life, who you think who's got a shot?
I mean, As much as we don't like to talk about the Pac-12, really for me it has to be Oregon. You know,
Oregon coming back to life. Yeah, I think we wrote them off after the Auburn game. Kind of said, maybe the Pac-12 is not going to have a team this year. Tell me why.
I mean, the longer I've seen Oregon, and this isn't just because we ended up being their tune-up game this year. Who saw that coming? It's Oregon. Bo Nix aside, is I don't want to say an elite team, but they're definitely getting there. You know, that front group that they have on their defense, they're a bunch of grave diggers. Those guys are dangerous. Oh, yeah. And those targets that Bo Nix has, I mean, they cover up a lot of what a freshman should be showing right now. He doesn't look as scared under pressure as some of the other freshmen that I've seen, and he's not making terrible decisions most of the times.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to have to dock the Pac-12 seconds for all this talk about Oregon. But I think there's a team out there that there's a couple of teams out there that I think we're forgetting. Guys, talk to your children about a 4-0 Wake Forest and a 4-0 Baylor and a 4-0 Minnesota and a 4-0 Southern Methodist who hasn't been ranked since the death penalty. Of those four teams, which one do you think has the best shot at the end of the year to really make some noise?
If there's a team that has a chance to compete at the end of the year in their conference, it's going to have to be SMU. I mean, they're in. We'll get to this later, but they're in a wide open conference right now, and the teams that they've actually played to this point are pretty legit, and they've actually been putting teams away. Like they comfortably beat TCU, and that was a game that not a lot of people gave them a shot. And their schedule is pretty favorable the rest of the way. They don't get UCF. They have to get through Memphis and Houston in the Western Division, as well as Tulane. But for the most part, they missed the better teams on the eastern side of the division of the conference. So I think they've got a real chance to be in the conference title game this year.
Let me throw this out there. This is Minnesota's October. Okay, they're at home against Illinois, at home against Nebraska, at Rutgers, and at home against Maryland. Guys, we could very well be going in November talking about an 8-0 Minnesota team. And if you remember correctly, this was my Big Ten West champion. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about Goldie.
I wouldn't feel that good about it. I understand they're 8-0, which is great and all, but their November schedule is pretty rough. They get Iowa, Penn State, Wisconsin, and just pretty much four really great teams. And they've only beaten teams by one score every week, and they're not good teams. They're not good teams.
I don't know if you guys are Mariners or not, but once you get to rowing that boat, you get some irreversible momentum. All right, so I'm thinking 8-0, they could be cruising down that river.
I'm sorry. I was a member of the Texas A&M crew team. Thank you very much. Don't you dare
I'm just saying,
whip that metaphor out against me.
They're rowing the boat, all right? I think they're looking pretty good.
So I think we're dodging two very obvious observations here. One, that the Big Ten West is what the NBA Eastern Conference is. Oof. I mean, you're just kind of cannon fodder for the other side. Golden State Warriors in the NBA, Ohio State in the Big Ten.
I don't know about Wisconsin. I don't know if you can put Wisconsin the can. Jonathan Taylor Thomas football touchdown, whatever we're calling. He's looked pretty good.
We'll get a chance to test that theory. We got Iowa and Michigan this week, and we'll see if Iowa is just cannon fodder for a Michigan team that I admittedly shit all over last week, but rightfully so.
Yeah. Hey, so speaking of that game, let's get into it. The noon shot for this week, we've got Iowa at Michigan. That's on Fox. We should note that we're filming this on Jim Harbaugh Day, so happy over. 10-3 for everybody, guys. I think 10-3. If you're a Michigan fan, you should be pretty thankful for a 10-3 season, just the way they've looked so far.
Especially with the schedule they have left. I mean, they don't have a lot of favorable opponents left. Like, they already went through Rutgers, so that's one of those ones out the window. I mean, the only could say gimmies left on the schedule, Maryland and Indiana. You haven't played any of the other big three in the Big Ten East yet, or Notre Dame, who's also still on the schedule. This Iowa game is really important. It's really important, and I think it's almost a must-win, especially when you get them at home.
Yeah.
This is a game that they need to win, and I think that they have a pretty decent chance. I think Iowa is a little bit overrated right now, not a ton, but their offense is getting a lot of praise. And the only time that they've gone up against the real defense was Iowa State, which Elastico, you can't take a lot from that, but they only put up 18 points. All the other games, they've been putting up a lot of points, but who's it really against? I mean, they only put up 30 against Rutgers.
True.
It's not a lot of points for against Rutgers.
That's a great point. Dick, what do you think?
I mean, this is something that I said in our pre-show meeting. I don't think great teams are great by beating great teams. They're great by beating good teams. And I don't think anyone's accusing Michigan of being great right now. But if you can't be consistent against middle-tier teams, I mean, that's just – you have no signs of success at that point. And that's something that, as an Aggie, I've seen year in and year out. I don't really buy into the hype or ever think that we're legitimate contenders if we can't string together wins against middle-tier teams. You know, those kind of E to B plus range.
Yeah,
and that's probably where I put Iowa right now. Is probably a solid B plus. I think they are what they are. I think that they have a very good chance of going somewhere. Depending on this game, they probably have a good chance of going somewhere between 9 and 10 wins, which is a pretty good year. But if Michigan wants to kind of reinsert themselves back into this Big Ten conversation, this is a game that they need to win. And really, they need to have that offense look like it's clicking.
Yeah.
Finally, after all the problems that they've had.
I think there are a lot of fans, and this year particularly Michigan fans, that can't quite appreciate how big of a jump it is to being a top 15 team to being a top 5 team. Like, that is a very significant gap. And, Michigan's, they just haven't closed it. And I think it's a little bit of unfair criticism because they're not a bad team. No. You still have to think that they're going to be right there competing for a Big Ten title all the way up until that Ohio State game. I feel like it's going to have conference championship game
until the Ohio State game is the operative. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if they actually get that far, just because I think that they're still probably a top 4 team in the conference.
Sure.
But they're catching every top team this year. They're not getting any favors on their crossover schedule, that's for sure.
No, absolutely.
They get Wisconsin and Iowa, who are clearly the 2 best teams on that side of the conference.
Right. So they already played Wisconsin. They've got Iowa. They've got to play at Penn State. They have Notre Dame at home, Michigan State at home, and Ohio State at home, though. So, even though they are playing a tough schedule, at least it's favorable in that they're playing those.
They get some of the teams at home. Yeah, they get Iowa at home, too. So a lot of their better games are at home.
Yeah.
It's just still, that's to run that gauntlet when you already have so many question marks. I mean, you really just, I guess maybe Rutgers was a get-right game for them.
Sure.
But just the way that offense has looked, the way Shea Patterson has looked in particular, he just has not been the guy that Michigan fans were hoping he would be this year.
No, absolutely not.
I think a lot of people were hoping that Dylan McCaffrey would be healthy for this game, so maybe he could step in, but I think he's still out with a concussion. I don't know. I still think Michigan has a chance to win this game just because I don't think Iowa's offense is as good as people think it is, but I'm still putting Michigan squarely in an 8-9 win situation just because of their schedule.
Okay. All right. Heading over to our chaser, we're going to head to the CBS Sports Network, and we're looking at Tulane.
Which I'm sure everybody here gets.
Yeah, everyone has. There's definitely not a place where all of the computers are interconnected where you could find this game for free. We're not advocating for that whatsoever.
Absolutely not.
No, never.
On the CBS Sports Network, Tulane at Army. Army has a really favorable schedule. They were someone we talked about in the preseason. I said if they could beat Michigan, that they could go 13-0. And Dick, you and I were talking like this might be the last tough game on their schedule until Army-Navy in December. What do you think about Tulane and Army on that?
Well, I mean, if they win, which, I mean, all signs kind of point to yes at this point, what does it really do for them? You know what I mean? It's, to your point, they lost the only marquee game of the season. I would be shocked if Army drops this game. If they did, you have to wonder if every game on the schedule at that point is a gimme. But if they do win, what do they really get? They're probably still going to be going to like the Armed Forces Bowl or something like that.
Sure.
And Army is one of those teams that always gets the benefit of the doubt.
Well, guys, Tulane is not a pushover this year.
Not at all.
They're a 3-point favorite in this game. I don't know if you guys caught the play at the end of the Houston game where Jalen McCleskey catches kind of a desperation, bounces off of two defenders and sprints to the end zone. Jalen McCleskey, former Oklahoma State receiver, going down there making huge plays. Tulane looks good.
And not to mention that the play before that miracle was a fumble rooski that they ran on the fake spike or the fake kneel
the
down.
annexation of Puerto Rico.
They were just gonna kneel that. So, I mean, that props to that coach for running that there. But I think Tulane was a team coming into the year that had some preseason hype as they could play spoiler in the American Conference. I think you're still probably a step below SMU and Memphis in that conference, in that division, but it's pretty wide open, especially when you already beat Houston, and Houston doesn't look like they're going to be that great this year.
Yeah, you put Derek King on the shelf for the season, so
it's because of Tulane. Tulane's the one that put him there.
So I guess what I would just say is don't write off this game. This is a G5 game, but I think this one right here has a ton of opportunity to be very entertaining.
And you look at I know Dick, you said Army doesn't have a lot to gain from this, but I mean, Army is probably not getting up into the New Year's Six conversation, especially with the way, unless Michigan goes on a tear. If Michigan goes on a tear and they become, Big Ten champions, they run the table. Suddenly, a double overtime loss at the Big House as your only loss doesn't look so bad. And like you guys said, Army does get the benefit of the doubt. So, with that in mind, there's probably a 1% chance that happens.
Sure.
You gotta just kind of pray and hope at this point, but it's still a possibility.
Well, I mean, and I don't want to harken back on the Michigan Army game too much, but I mean, I do think Tulane is a very good team in the American, but I don't think they go to double overtime against Michigan.
No.
You know what I mean?
And I don't think a lot of teams do. I think the way Army plays, I think they're close. Anybody can play with Army because of the way they play.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I mean, let's keep this train going. We have Tulane. I think that's a great segue into our next segment. Guys, the American Conference is living the American dream. Look at the American Western.
Still love that name.
Guys, the Western race, you've got Southern Methodist, who's got 44 points per game. I mean, Tulane, who we just talked about, and not to mention, guys, this conference has one of the best alternate uniforms in the game, top to bottom. You saw the powder Tulane had, the script Dallas, the SMU had.
Those are really sweet.
This is a really entertaining conference, and I think that maybe they're not getting the love they deserve because I think some of these games are going to be a real treat, and somebody has to win it. I think preseason it was easy to say UCF and everybody. UCF showed that they're beatable. So really, we're kind of trending toward what I think is going to be a really entertaining season in the American. JJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I think people kind of see UCF's a little vulnerable without Mackenzie Milton. You kind of saw it against LSU last year, but I mean that's LSU. It's not Pitt. I mean Pitt. I think they're a competitive team this year, but
boost your strength schedule.
If UCF wants to, they did. That was I was admittedly rooting for Pitt in that game because it made us look better. But UCF really kind of opens the door for everybody, and I really think it really only opens the door on the Western side of things. I think the game against Cincinnati this week kind of decides that division. Winner of that game is likely going to win the Eastern Division, so you could pretty much chalk that division up as done after this weekend, after tomorrow, after Friday. The West is just, I think ultimately it's going to be Memphis, but I really hope that Sonny Dykes and Shane Buechele pull it out because I think that would just be an amazing story for them to win that division.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of what SMU has got going. I mean, Pony Excess, I think, is one of the, if not the best college football 30 for 30s. If you haven't watched it, go check it. Definitely top 3. The U was really good. The Penn State one was good. The Brian Bosworth one was really good, especially if you've got if you're a father with a son. But SMU has really had a long road back to where getting back to where they are ranked. Like I said, for the first time, they winning against TCU, which is
huge for them.
It's huge for them. Exactly. And then you look at Tulsa, who was leading Oklahoma State in the at the half in their game. Memphis, who's undefeated. Houston, sure, they've hung it up, but Navy, they're sneaky good. They can really hang with a team. Like I said, Memphis, they've got to win against Ole Miss. Like these are teams with quality wins that I think can really provide some solid entertainment.
They're more entertaining than the ACC, and I think that's obvious at this point. I mean, the ACC is not an entertaining conference, but the AAC is, top to bottom, is pretty competitive. I mean, take UConn, USF, who happen to play each other this week. You take them out of it, but pretty much everybody else is at least competitive. Like, it's not going to be a walk.
And not to jump on SMU too much and kind of get this hype train going, but this last summer, one of the players for SMU interned at my company, and I sat down and I was talking with him one day, and he told me, he said, we're going undefeated this year. And I'm like, okay, yeah, really? Be honest with me. He's like, no, we're going undefeated. We've cleaned some things up, new coaches. He liked it a lot. And I was wrong.
He's right so far.
Yeah, I mean,
imagine if he can predict that, maybe he's going to be coming back full time at some point.
Yeah. So November, it's going to be a November to remember for SMU. They're going to Memphis. They've got East Carolina at home, which should be an easy win. They have to go to Annapolis and play the Midshipmen, and then they finish the season with Tulane at home. And so, that's going to be a tough November for them. I think if SMU is going to do it, this is a great week to prove that against Tulsa at home. And then, Temple, Houston. So really, they've got a pretty favorable schedule. Their tough games are at home minus that Tulane one. I think, JJ, you said Memphis is going to be kind of the team to watch there in the West. I think this Tulane SMU game is going to carry a lot more weight than people thought.
It very well might. I mean, if Tulane will play Memphis before that, and Memphis plays SMU at the beginning of the month of November. I think Memphis is just a little bit better, a little bit more experienced than being in some of those, really big conference games. I think they're just due. They really probably should have won at least one of those conference championship games against UCF the last 2 years.
Sure.
I think the door is really open for them. I think their new freshman running back, Kenneth Gainwell, he's a stud. He's picking up right where Pollard and Henderson left off the last couple of years at Memphis.
Yeah. If Memphis does get past SMU on November 2nd, they've got Houston, South Florida, and Cincinnati. And Cincinnati is off to a quiet 4-1, 3-1 start. They got blanked by Ohio State. I was ready to jump off the bandwagon, but since then they've done well. They've won their games. So I think if Memphis gets past SMU, though, I think it very well is going to be Memphis's division to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, 3:30 shots and chasers, guys. This is, I think, probably the best game of the week, which is not saying a lot because it's Auburn at Florida on CBS.
Yeah.
Auburn obviously looking great right now. Bo Nix not playing like a freshman, even though he is a freshman. In Florida, without Felipe Franks, turning to their backup Kyle Trask. Dick, what do you think is going to be? You're the SEC, you're the resident guy here. Talk to me. What's going on with this game?
I also work on Saturdays, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. But it really kind of came alive for me ever since we lost to Auburn. But I've been paying attention to them more and more, and I don't really think it's fluky. I don't think I'm ready to jump on the Gus bus quite yet, but I think that just talent-wise, they're stout top to bottom. Like I mentioned earlier on the show, their front seven on defense, they're nothing to mess around with. I don't think they're quite as elite as what Clemson had last year, but then again, who is? I think that defensively, they're as good as any team in the SEC right now. I think that Bo Nix has a lot of discipline for a freshman, and that the weapons that he has on offense allow him to be a little bit his decision-making is a little easier, let's put it that way, because his guys always find a way to kind of cover up anything that might obstruct the game plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
JJ?
And you mentioned Auburn's front seven and really their offensive line as well. When you've got a team that can push around two SEC West schools that maybe aren't the top of the SEC West this year, but they're not Arkansas or Ole Miss. Like Mississippi State and Texas A&M are solid SEC teams. When you can dominate the line of scrimmage on both sides that emphatically, I mean that says something. Like that proves a point that they probably have at least the best defensive line in the conference, and potentially one of the better offensive lines as well. And when you can dominate the line of scrimmage, you're going to be a tough team to beat. And when you're also one of the best defensive lines in the country, if not the best, and you're going up against a quarterback that doesn't look great, you've got a really good chance of winning a road game against a top 10 team.
And to your point on the offensive line, it's hard for any young quarterback to hang, 56 on another team?
Yeah.
I mean, kudos to them for getting Bo Nix out of pressure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think we saw early on this season the Florida-Miami game. Florida really had so many opportunities to really put that game away, and it was their offensive line that was kind of falling apart and letting Miami stay in that game. And so seeing those issues that we saw early on, when you go against a team like Auburn, if you don't have answers for what Auburn is going to put in their front set, it doesn't matter who you've got back there throwing the ball. You're going to have issues. I think Auburn wins this one. I think they cover. And I think that maybe next week we're talking about, depending on what happens, I think it very well could say, is Florida kind of one of those teams that are dead in the water at this.
Yeah.
I mean, which is kind of funny because we all anticipated coming into the season that Kentucky was going to be the team that was going to, kind of flame out after an encouraging season last year. I mean, they kind of are.
Still might be.
They did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they're not, but wouldn't you say that Florida would kind of take that mantle more? They looked so promising. Everyone kind of assumed that maybe not a dynasty, but these guys would be perennial contenders.
But especially the way they ended the season last year. I mean, that dominant win over Michigan was. I know they played Michigan like 17 times the last 10 years, but that was
it's a rivalry game now.
Yeah,
I mean that's what it is.
But that was a ridiculous win. Like they blew the doors off Michigan, and Michigan was in the playoff. 2 weeks or going into the last week of the season. So I mean,
I'm not saying
I think they're a big disappointment this year.
I'm not saying Florida's a one-hit wonder. I did kind of speculate before the season that Kentucky maybe. I think that Florida may just go back to being kind of who they've been ever since Urban Meyer left, which is. Yeah, you might see them in an SEC championship game once every 5 years, but they're not going to be kind of nipping at the heels of Georgia year in and year out.
I see. I disagree with you there. I think Dan Mullen's an excellent coach. And I think once he gets one of his quarterbacks in and actually running his system and not one of the holdovers from Will Muschamp and whatever other garbage they had at head coach the last couple of years,
Tell me you really feel.
They've had the talent. I mean, they haven't. It's not like they haven't had talent on both sides of the ball to actually be at least, what they were last year. I mean, he came in and kind of proved that. He didn't really bring in anybody else.
Yeah.
I think Dan Mullen is an excellent coach. I think he will continue to make them better. It may not get to the Georgia, Alabama level, but I think they will be nipping at Georgia's heels.
Let's not forget either. They've got Auburn this week. They have to go to LSU next week, South Carolina at home, and then Georgia at home. I mean, 3 of their next 4 games are against top 7 teams. I just don't know if Florida really has put together at this stage to get through that gauntlet.
No.
And JJ, remind me to ask you your opinion on Jimbo Fisher time when it comes up.
If you want to talk about Jimbo Fisher, I would love to talk about the Arkansas game. We called that game.
Oh yeah.
I think we said, JJ, I think you were the one who was on the show last week that said, "Hey, what if our A&M's not that good and Arkansas covers?" And that was kind of my big point going into it. Here's what I will say about Arkansas. I watched that game because I was very interested. When Ben Hicks comes in, I'm sitting looking at him, looking at size, I'm looking at insanely slow release. Go back and watch this. He's got a very slow release.
Yes, he does.
And I thought he was a freshman. I'm like, you know what? He might be pretty good in 2 or 3 years. No, he's a senior that transferred. He's done after this year.
Yeah, you think I think SMU might have upgraded their quarterback a little bit this year in the transfer portal.
Yeah. And so Arkansas, if they weren't done before, if Nick Starkel doesn't come back, they're definitely done.
I think they were done after they lost to San Jose State.
Yeah.
And not to harp on last week too much because I wasn't here to defend myself, but in the last 7 games that we've played, ever since we joined the conference in 2012, I think this game's gone to overtime 3 or 4 times. This is a rivalry game. This is a game that's played close every year. And you can look at my comment history. I mean, this is a game that I said was going to be within 1 score, if not within 1 field goal. It's played close every year, and this is a game that the Aggies always seem to find a way to pull out just by some miracle.
Baylor, we said earlier, off to a 4-0 start, looking pretty good. Iowa State, they were able to take care of business. Iowa State came back and scored 21 points in the fourth. Baylor puts that one away. And Kansas State, a really lackluster performance against Oklahoma State, going 1 for 13 on 3rd down. Oklahoma State's not really known as a defensive team. They've got a lot of firepower and all. But Skylar Thompson just didn't bring it to Stillwater with him. And so what do you guys think about this Baylor-Kansas State game?
I don't want to say Matt Rule can't afford to win this game because judging by that contract, he can afford to a lot nowadays.
Yeah, he's not even dry on that. That's a monster deal.
Yeah, it is.
Exactly, but this is not a game that he wants to come out, and I don't even want to say lose, but not afford to just blow the doors off in.
Sure.
Which, to your point, Baylor's made tremendous progress in the last 3-4 years. It's impossible for me to think that he comes out and just doesn't completely put away Kansas State, which has been very lackluster this year. But you can't help but have that thought in the back of your head that if he just doesn't dominate every facet on Saturday, that you're going to have some knee-jerk reactions and a lot of conversations on Sunday that maybe we shouldn't be having.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. Every time we talk about the Big 12, I feel like numbers 3 through 8 kind of just reshuffle every single week. Last week we were talking that Kansas State could very well be that number 3 team, and now we're talking about them getting blown out at home against a Baylor team who, if you look at their schedule, they've got Texas Tech at home after this. They have to go to Stillwater, which I obviously think that's going to be a really difficult game, but they've got West Virginia, Oklahoma, and Texas all at coming up after that, and then they finish out the season at Kansas. Guys, it's not crazy to think that they could steal one of those 3 tough Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Texas, and finish the season 10-2, or hell, even 11-1 if they really get things.
And JJ, I think that Baylor might fit into where you were talking about Florida fitting in the last segment.
Yeah.
Which is, maybe they're not that de facto number 2 team in the Big 12, but they're nipping at Texas's heels every year, and all they need to do is drop 1 game or 1 play in the right game in order for Baylor to take that number 2 spot and be playing against Oklahoma every year.
Yeah. JJ, what are your last thoughts on Baylor, Kansas State?
I think Baylor will get to that point. I think they're probably like an 8-14 this year, which would still be a great step. It'd be a great step forward for them who were in the gutter a couple of years ago after all the scandals they had to get to a bowl game last year to now being a respectable 8-4 in a tough conference. I do think that they win this game. I think Kansas State is kind of in the same category as like a Maryland, not to that extent. But we kind of overreacted a little bit to their win over Mississippi State. Mississippi State's not they're not a world beater by any means in the SEC. It's still an SEC team, but there was also Tommy Stevens playing in that game, who I'm admittedly kind of disappointed in this year. He's not looked great. I'm kind of glad that we went with Sean Clifford on our end, but I think Kansas State is. Coming into this year, it was Kansas was 10, Kansas State was 9 in a lot of Big 12 media polls.
Sure.
Kansas State was not expected to be this great team under Chris Klieman in his first year. Chris Klieman did a lot of great things at North Dakota State. He will probably do great things at Kansas State, but I don't think that this game will really tell us a whole lot about Baylor yet. And like I said, I still think Baylor will be good, just they're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I'm really. I think I'm heading up to Stillwater. That's our homecoming against Baylor. So I think that's going to be the one that's really going to show us who this Baylor team can.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, moving forward. Hey, this is a segment we call Last Chance U. Not like the show, but kind of like the show. This is where we're going to talk about two teams and, what is it going to look like either of those teams lose, and what are the repercussions of that going to be? We've got a real pillow fight on our hands. It's Maryland at Rutgers. Rutgers, of course, Chris Ash, he had his last chance last week against Michigan, got blanked, and he got fired. So, guys, let's talk about Maryland for a minute. We've kind of been, we've already alluded to how hard and fast we've jumped off of this hype train. What happens if Maryland loses this game to Rutgers against an interim coach?
My God, the ghost of Chris Ash and a third-string quarterback drop-kicking Maryland would be the worst thing to happen to the DMV area since the War of 1812.
I mean, last Friday.
I don't know how you recover from that. I think the coach that pulls that off, even though the hype died 2 weeks ago, gets 5-10-year contract extension. I mean, it New Jersey would be celebrating. Maryland would be in a total state of disaster. JJ, you know the Big Ten better than any of us. You tell me from your perspective.
If you lose to especially after the performance you put out last week, the players also the players only meeting, we're going to come out a better team against Rutgers. I don't think this is going to happen. I think Maryland wins by multiple scores, but if they were to somehow lose to Rutgers, I don't know how Mike Locksley isn't already on the hot seat. I know it's only 1 year, but this team does have talent. If you lose to Rutgers, this coach, he already was not a popular hire with Maryland alums.
But what about all of the extra seats they brought in to Maryland? Who's gonna sit in these seats?
Not Maryland fans. I think they had their one chance last Friday, and they blew it so bad. That was the only time. There were still a lot of Penn State fans at that game. The Maryland student section was huge, and it was gone before the end of the first quarter. They blew it really bad last weekend. I think it's a combination of Penn State's a little bit better than even I thought, and Maryland definitely was not as good as they looked against Syracuse, who's probably not a good team either.
And I don't think there's any way Maryland wins this game. Rutgers, it's week one of their interim head coach. They're down to their third string quarterback, Johnny Langan. If this guy wins this game, though, is he going to go down in history as Maryland football hero?
What was his name? Was it Johnny Langdon? Did you say
Langan?
Langan.
I feel like I want to say he's a transfer. He may not be though.
Let me give you advice, young buck. If that happens, never graduate. Just stay in Rutgers full time for the rest of your life. You will have it made. That's
also
it won't get any better than that.
Don't play another down. Don't tarnish the shine.
Guys,
retire legend. That's all it is.
Don't worry. Johnny Langan transferred in from Boston College.
Okay.
God.
The same Boston College that lost to Kansas by 24, right?
Hey, I'll mail either one of you $1 right now if you can tell me the interim head coach's name at Rutgers.
Last name's Nunzio, isn't it?
First name Nunzio.
Oh.
Who the fuck has a first name Nunzio?
Hey, this man, a Division I head football coach, has the first name Nunzio.
That must be the most New Jersey thing I've ever heard. I'm from there.
Apparently, there are actually some Rutgers fans that are slightly excited to see him coach because apparently he's going to be just absurdly aggressive with the game plan. So, we'll see. It might be interesting. Yeah, who cares?
I've heard the rule of thumb that an underdog should always play like they're behind because they probably are.
Yep.
With Rutgers, I don't know what game your favorite is, so just fucking have at it.
All right, we've spent too much time on Maryland Rutgers. What do you guys say we reset the game clock?
Let's do it.
All right, this is a game called Reset the Game Clock, and here's how it works. we're going to look at the games on this week's schedule, and we're going to pick one that we feel like would be a much better game if we could reset the game clock to yesterday. So pretty simple, pretty fun. JJ, what do you got?
So I'm going to reset the game clock to 2000 for the Miami Virginia Tech game. This was Michael Vick's last year at Virginia Tech, and he unfortunately got hurt about 5 passes into this game, and obviously the game wasn't going to be the same after that. Virginia Tech was a very good team, but without Michael Vick, who was a transcendent player, especially at the college level, they weren't going to beat a Miami team that would go on to, win a national championship. So I would like to go back and watch that game if Michael Vick never got injured.
Healthy. Yeah, so Miami ended up winning that game 41-21. Obviously, you take a guy like Vick out of the game, especially, Vick in his prime. It's not the same. And Virginia Tech Miami this year, I'm not going to lie to you, I really don't care. There's nothing here. Like, I don't want anything to do with Virginia Tech football this year. Man, that was ugly. And I guarantee there's a lot of proud Tech fans out there who wish they could go back to I think they'd even take Marcus Vick at this point. They don't even don't do Mike.
Just unrelated, I feel so bad for Bud Foster that this is his last year. I mean, he's such a great defensive coordinator, was there for so long, and he's going out with a whimper, unfortunately, and I don't think it's his fault.
No, I don't think so either. Dick, what do you think? Where are we going?
I mean, similar era, different teams. 1998, Tennessee, Georgia.
Ooh, let's reset that game clock to 1998, guys. Isn't the SEC a lot better when you're getting top 10 teams every week? I mean, I think that this 98 season is a good example of kind of why the SEC is what it is today, because we would get October games with Tennessee and Georgia ranked 4. Dick, why you picking 98? Tell me about it.
Well, I was torn between 98 and literally any other Tennessee. And I just decided on 98. No. The reason I picked it, Tennessee went undefeated that year. This was kind of the start of a series of long and unfortunate events for Georgia where they dropped a couple games, including to the season ender to Georgia Tech. I mean, I don't know how many times in recent memory we've gotten 2 undefeated teams 5 weeks into the season coming in and playing each other. I mean, in what's really a great divisional matchup that a lot of people look forward to, even when Tennessee is a lackluster team.
And no doubt.
Yeah, and even the Auburn-Florida game this week's a top 10 matchup, but the hype around it is not nearly the same as what would be around a Tennessee-Georgia matchup.
No, absolutely not. I'm not going to lie to you. Another I think early on we wanted to think that Tennessee maybe got surprised and maybe they weren't really as bad as they were. No,
they got surprised by how bad they were.
They really are that bad. And Georgia is really good. I don't think we're going to need to see a flashy game from Jake Fromm, which is good. For whatever reason, they don't scheme flashiness into their game. But Jake Fromm is absolutely the field general that they need. And, they're going to take care of business. Gosh, wouldn't it just be nice to have a good, just a really good, SEC top 10 matchup with Florida and Georgia, or Tennessee and Georgia. This was the Peyton Manning year. Man, I wish this game was watchable, but it's not. So,
it's not.
And it's really tremendous how Tennessee, just by name alone, Tennessee, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, people still go to that game because of what Tennessee was.
It was.
Actually see it and not just hear my grandfather tell me tales about when Tennessee was relevant. I mean, I can't imagine what that must have been like. It must have been like seeing a Zeppelin in 1919.
Yeah, unfortunately, this year the season ticket holders are they're not looking forward to this game. They're probably more looking forward to Tennessee Vanderbilt at the end.
They're probably selling their tickets to Georgia fans this week.
Yeah. How much red are we going to see in Neyland this? You think so?
How much was there in Folsom?
I'm pretty sure there was something going around from Georgia fans that they wanted to try and organize a red and black checkered pattern into the stands. It
That's
was
just
kind of a joke,
disrespectful.
but also kind of serious because they probably could at this point.
Oh, well. All right. Hey, guys, 7:30, shots and chasers. Let's make it happen. What do we have there in the that 7:30 slot? It's California, Oregon on Fox. So how about we talk about that? JJ, you seem to really enjoy some Pac-12 chat last week while I was.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us what are the keys to this game?
I'm excited to talk about some more Pac-12. This is great. Like California or Cal had a rough week a rough Friday.
Yeah.
It would have been the roughest Friday if it wasn't for Maryland just getting destroyed. The Cal losing their starting quarterback and losing the game to Arizona State, it really makes their offense ineffective. They're not going to be able to move the ball against an Oregon team that has looked very, very good on defense. They're kind of flipping the script on a traditional Oregon team where they're like an SEC caliber defense and an old school SEC offense. It doesn't make a lot of sense. They still are missing a lot of wide receivers. Johnson, state transfer, who still hasn't made his debut, and he's supposed to be one of the better wide receivers for Justin Herbert this year.
Mm-hmm.
But when you got a defense that's playing as well as it is, and you're going up against a Cal team that's playing a backup quarterback in Devin Monster, who looked bad, very bad.
The Monster Mash is not. It is October. It's Monster Mash season. So, if they pull off this up, this is just going to reinforce kind of what we talk about every year since the playoffs began. That the Pac-12 cannibalizes it every year, and they're not going to be able to have. It's bad for the conference. I think
it is.
That when they miss the playoffs year in and year out. This is a fundamental flaw in a 4-team playoff, right? When you have 5 power conference or the Power 5 conference, somebody has to be left out. And unfortunately, when you get teams like LSU, Georgia, and Alabama, it's not crazy to think that 2 of those teams could make it. So now you've got 2 conferences
and Notre Dame consistently being good again. There are scenarios where you could see only 2 conferences represented.
And I'm gonna move away from the playoff discussion a little. I think Oregon is kind of excluded so far from that Pac-12 cannibalization, and I don't think that it's going to start this week.
No.
Like I mentioned earlier, Oregon's one loss came from an underestimated Auburn team who's only gotten better as the season's gone on. That looks like a better and better loss, if there is such a thing, as the season goes on. Oregon, at this point, they have the best chance of anyone in the Pac-12 to be going to the CFP. That's just the fact of it. If they beat Cal this week, sure, they're starting a second-string quarterback. But when you're looking at it at the end of the season, do you remember that? Or do you remember that Cal only had 1 loss at that point? And Cal was undefeated. And who did they beat along the way?
They beat Washington. That's a big win.
And that's what you have to look at. I'm not saying Oregon wins out, but I'm saying they probably have the best chance, if they do, to make some noise this year.
Yeah.
Try to get some representation back into the CFP, which we haven't had since, I think, the very first one?
The second one with Washington.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, our 7:30 chaser there, Pittsburgh at Duke. Duke is one of those teams that, they're kind of clawing back into some conversation. Pittsburgh, obviously, with the big win over UCF. I think, JJ, you saw it firsthand. They gave Penn State all they asked for. And I like what Pat Narduzzi is doing there. I think he's a solid coach. I think he's good for that program. What do you think about this Pittsburgh-Duke game?
So I'm actually very excited for this game. I think it might be one of the 3 games that decides the Coastal Division, because I think the top 3 teams in the Coastal Division are probably Virginia, Pitt, and Duke. Yeah. And I think Duke is my candidate for the team that's coming back to life after that thrashing they took in against Alabama in week 1, which pretty much everybody would in the ACC outside of Clemson. But since then, they're 3-0. Their offense is averaging just under 44 points a game, and they've got a quarterback in Quentin Harris who is actually completing passes at a higher rate than Daniel Jones did in college by more than 10%.
Oh, you mean New York Giants starting
Danny
quarterback?
Dimes.
Now,
and Quentin Harris has also run for over 300 yards, averaging over 6 yards a clip. Their offense has looked very good. I know it hasn't been against the best competition, but it's still a Bud Foster defense that he tore up last week. And
Yeah.
I know that the offense isn't what it was supposed to be under Justin Fuente, but I think this Duke team is going to surprise, especially when their overall season was set at like 5 wins.
Oh yeah.
I think they could very easily win this game, but I also think that Pitt's shown that they're feisty. They're the two of the top 3 teams in the Coastal Division. It's going to be a very, very good game. I honestly don't know who I'd pick in this game. I think I would lean Duke just because they're at home.
Yeah,
but
I think that's good.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game.
And allow me to put this in a little bit more context. So you both have heard of Occam's razor, right?
Sure.
Eliminate as many assumptions as you can, and you probably arrive at what's most likely the right answer. Duke's only loss so far was to Alabama. Alabama could be the number 1 team. That is not, in my mind, an assumption. Alabama is the number 1 team until proven otherwise. Duke could therefore be the number 2 team in the country. And when we couple this with the fact that Pittsburgh beat the 2017 national championship earlier this year in a nail-biter thriller to the very end, I don't know how we don't have what's a primetime matchup. It's a night game for a reason, guys.
Yeah.
This is just going to be a slugfest, start to finish. This is going to have implications this week. Not only in the Coastal, you said 2 or 3 in the Coastal. CFP implications. Let's see it. Come on.
All right.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I don't know if you guys have ever been to Wallace Wade Stadium there in Durham. It's actually a really good venue.
It's a nice, it is
to watch. It's pretty intimate. You get pretty close to the field. You know, it's not massive. And I think those guys are in for a real treat. I think this could be a really good game.
Oh yeah.
Hey, so
jokes aside, yes.
One of the big stories this week, we saw just almost a domino effect, a waterfall effect of name, image, and likeness bills being started and passed and promoted throughout the country. California signed House Bill 206 into law, and more than a dozen similar bills in states across the nation are in some stage of development. And so yesterday, Ash and I scrambled, and we were able to link up with the guy Darren Heitner, who's one of the lawyers in Florida, who is crafting their state's legislation for the exact same thing. We were able to catch up with him, and here's what's really cool about this, guys. We put it out on Reddit that we were going to talk to this guy, and we started soliciting questions from the community, and we had about a 26-minute conversation with him, and in that time we were able to get about 10 or 15 questions answered. These are things that people were asking from, how long is this legislation going to take, hypothetical situations, and we even got his take on whether or not he thought this could ruin college football. Spoiler alert, he's crafting the legislation.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to think that.
Yeah, I was going to say not biased at all.
No way. And so this guy, he was actually a really great conversation we had with him. We're going to play a clip of that now and tease it out because Sunday we're uploading the full interview. We'll have it right here on the YouTube channel. We'll post it in the subreddit. So let's take a look at a little preview from that conversation. That there will be or should be any sort of cap or fair market price in terms of the compensation someone could receive for their NILs?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And one thing, we want to be very careful about the language that we use. It's not compensation. In fact, what the athletes will be able to generate are, in essence, royalties for the license of their publicity rights, so name, image, and likeness from third parties, corporations, and the like. But our idea is simply this. It's a free market. It's capitalism. Let the market dictate what the individual's value is. Let the individual negotiate to his or her ability. And sometimes it'll be based on how great the individual performs on the field or on the court, etc. Other times it may be based on the social media following of the individual. I mean, these things play out in real life outside of college sports. We deal with it in professional sports, and we deal with it outside of the sports industry. So with able representatives, I think the individuals will be able to calculate what their value is and negotiate what the market allows them to in these types of deals.
Yeah, so I guess bear with me down this rabbit hole. And purely hypothetical, I just want to get kind of your response to a situation. Let's say I am Florida State alumni and I own a car dealership, and Ash is Miami alumni and he owns a car dealership, and you're Florida alumni and you own a car dealership, and all three of us make our pitch to the recruit. I'm going to offer 10,000, Ash is going to offer 20,000, you're going to offer 50,000 for him to, and say, if you sign with Florida and represent my dealership, I will give you 50,000. You don't see any kind of issue or any kind of how potential for this to become kind of problematic down the future?
One, that's an improper inducement under the NCAA rules and regulations. And if it comes out that there was that inducement that was provided, the school and the athlete will still suffer the same penalties that they would under the current rules and regulations that the NCAA provides. But second of all, and importantly, right now we're only talking about college students. So it sounds like you're talking about a recruitment tool where an athlete would choose a school based on the offer, the endorsement offer from an individual who may be loosely attached to that institution.
Sure. Right.
That wouldn't apply here because it still would be improper.
Okay.
It's prior to the individual enrolling in the academic.
And that impropriety would also include transfer students. So as someone goes into the transfer portal, we're still talking about the same improper inducement there?
Absolutely.
I think that's a very important distinction, Ash, maybe something that a lot of people haven't realized or haven't considered when they make that argument. Yeah, guys, that was a great conversation that Ash and I were able to have with Devin. Really looking forward to that. Go ahead and check back on the YouTube channel. We'll put that up Sunday morning. We don't want to interrupt anybody's college football time, but we'll put a link out there on the subreddit. And I think that the community in general will be very happy with the conversation that we had. But quick reactions, the big thing I want to point out, you just saw there in the clip, this is not a recruiting tool. He was very clear, very specific, that the NCAA laws, bylaws on recruiting and improper contact with recruits, whether in high school or in the transfer portal, that's still off limits. Now we get into the conversation about intrinsic value and perceptions, and you'll see in the full interview, but kind of that alone, what's your quick reaction, JJ?
Yeah, to me, that I've been for this for a while, for the image and likeness for the players. I didn't expect that to be a part of it. That was obviously one of the key concerns that a lot of people that were against putting this law into place was that they were worried that it was going to affect recruiting. But if with the way that this is described, this is actually going to not affect that at all, and it's going to be once they actually step foot on the university. Once they've already completed their admission to the university, then they can start to pursue their endorsements and everything like that. So to me, that just kind of strengthens what I thought before, that this isn't really going to change all that much. It's really just going to be a benefit for the players and giving them like a basic human right to be able to use their own name. Like I still think that's so messed up that this has gone on for that long. They can't use their own name.
Yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, when you start to look at college towns in Florida, Tallahassee, Gainesville, Orlando, Miami, obviously the conventional wisdom is that there is more money to be made in Miami. And so, I think that there's going to be a point there that a recruit is going to factor that into their decision. But
absolutely.
I don't think that that's going to be, how is that any different than the prestige of the school's academic programs or the facilities they have or
the ability to get someone to the NFL.
Exactly. How many pros are they pumping in? How many championships are they winning? Yeah. These are all factors that go into a recruit's decision. This will be another factor, but I don't think that it will be, if everyone's following the rules, because nobody ever breaks any of the recruiting rules ever. Except for the other team. And so I think this is just going to be something that's going to factor into it.
Really, I really loved his explanation. Something that will only happen when the student is in fact a student of his particular institution, transfer, recruit, or otherwise. Really, there's a couple institutions out there I'm worried about. The one above all else is Oregon. I don't see how a school could be that intrinsically tied to one of the largest athletic brands in the country and not have an unfair advantage in recruiting. I would be shocked if legislation like this is imposed kind of across the country and the NCAA kind of tailors some of their bylaws to it, and we don't see Oregon become a monster in the Pac-12. It would be completely out of my realm of possibility to think that wouldn't be the case.
So this is something that I've looked into a little bit, Oregon specifically, because they're probably the biggest test case because they do have the biggest donor out of anybody. But he's also a retired CEO. He doesn't actually run the company anymore. There's a lot more execs that belong to other universities that they have no affiliation to Oregon. So for them to be able to pull all this money in when the money doesn't actually belong to the former CEO anymore, that the company itself is going to want to do endorsements for the players that are actually going to be worth it. And if that actually becomes an issue, other universities are going to pull away from Nike because they're going to realize it's bullshit. They're going to pull away, and they can use Adidas, they can use wherever else, and still make money. So it could have long-term business ramifications if Nike tried to do that with Oregon, and I don't think that's going to happen.
And that may be kind of the equal and opposite reaction to that, is that Nike's influence in college football diminishes as a result. But I think that it has less to do with Phil Knight in particular and more to do with Nike's presence in college football and how this has been their flagship university for a long, 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 long time. A lot of what they've ever debuted goes through Oregon, and that they would find a way to make sure that their talent looks good in more ways than one.
If you're telling me that Nike wouldn't put some of their endorsement dollars into someone like Tua or Trevor Lawrence just because he didn't go to Oregon, Nike's going to take advantage of the players that can make them money, and that might not be players that are at Oregon. It might, but it might not be. And I think that they're too big of a company to get tied into. Let's make Oregon a superpower.
Yep. All right, guys. We do it every week here. Dan, dedicated to my least favorite conference. This is the Pac-12 seconds, and JJ, you've got the honors this week. What do you have for us coming out of the Pac?
So I'll do our shots and chasers for the 10:30 time slot. We got Oregon State at UCLA as our shot. It is a big-time offensive scoring fest upcoming, and then our chaser is Washington Stanford, just so you guys can see Washington's still pretty good.
Ooh, a little bit time to spare it. So, I'm curious here. You didn't get enough Pac-12 in talk while I was gone last week, but I will say I don't think this was the reason. We did have a great week in viewers last week, a little bit more than we typically do. I don't know if it was more Pac-12 or less of me, and hopefully the former as opposed to the latter. But great Pac-12 seconds there. Thanks for doing that. Let's do a quick recap. The viewer's guide to Saturday. So our shots and chasers and Caleb, our producer, who does an excellent job there, the man behind the curtain. He's got the picks for us. So let's get those up on the screen and let's take a look at what he has. So going back to our noon shots and chasers, the Iowa-Michigan game, he's going to give us, who's he got for us? Michigan, Iowa. Looks like Michigan is his pick. Solid pick there. Tulane, Army. We did a lot of talk, and he's got Army going through. That'd be a huge blow to Tulane, especially with the opportunities they have.
Yep.
Down there in the 4 p.m. Time slot, Auburn at Georgia. He's got the Tigers going in. I think that's a solid pick.
Really making some controversial picks.
Yeah, really.
Yep.
Really
going out on a limb.
Baylor, Kansas State, what do you have for us? and he's going to get us the fighting Coach Clemens. Kansas State rolling at home against Baylor.
I feel like he did this to spite me.
Yeah, I think he just did that on purpose.
Yeah, you watch your mouth. This is the old switcheroo. So he's going to take Baylor on this one.
Okay.
Baylor moves to 5-0. Cal, Oregon in the 7 p.m. slot. This is going to take up. He's got Oregon, solid pick there. And then Pitt, Duke, the game that I think a lot of people in the ACC are looking forward to. Pitt rolls at Wallace Wade, and then rolling into 10 p.m. the late games. Oregon State versus UCLA. He's got Oregon State, the Beavers. You know, I've said this.
Always appreciate a good Beaver.
Yeah, we went up to Corvallis earlier this season, and I think Oregon State is right on the cusp of putting it together and having a pretty solid team. So I like that pick as well. Washington, Stanford, I don't think there's going to be any surprise here. Jacob Eason, the purple cutler, is going to take it for the Huskies.
I mean, is that going to be, to go back to the shot there, is that going to be more good Oregon State or bad UCLA?
I mean, you know, really, you saw what happened in the snuff film that we saw against Oklahoma. So it very well could be bad UCLA because they're definitely capable of it. And Oregon, I think, is right there on the cusp of it together. All right. So Sunday morning, we've got our Sunday storylines. Sunday morning, when you wake up, Dick, what do you think is going to be the top story?
I think our top story is going to be that excellent interview that we do on him and likeness in the NCAA.
You know,
I mean,
that's great, guys. If you're watching this, definitely check back in Sunday morning. I'm stoked for that interview. I think people are going to be really happy with how that turned out. JJ, what do you think?
I think there's going to be an overreaction to a Michigan victory this weekend. I do think that Michigan gets a small victory over Iowa, and I think people overreact like, oh, all right, we're good, we're back, everything's going to be great. That schedule's still too tough. But the storyline coming out is Michigan pulls off a small victory over Iowa at home.
Small victory?
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be close. It'll be a close game.
Okay.
Guys, I think we wake up Sunday morning and everyone forgets this week happened. Let's look at next Saturday's slate. Quick preview: OU, Texas, Bama, A&M, Florida, LSU, Penn State, Iowa, USC, Notre Dame, Michigan State, Wisconsin. I think we're going to wake up Sunday morning. We're going to be so ready for the next week's slate of games. This week is just
going to be
a blur. You probably
Thank you for mentioning a second, but unless Kellen Mond becomes Johnny Manziel, I just don't know how we part the red tide this year.
Yeah, I will say I'm probably more excited for your game than you are because I'm going to be there live.
Oh, you mother!
My first game in College Station. I've got sideline passes and all, so I'm stoked.
Wow.
We'll do some content. So check back Saturday for some exclusive content from the stand. The Corps cadets representing, and so we'll see you guys there. Final words, Dick.
You're going to be filming Midnight Yell. Did I get that correct in the pre-show meeting? You're going to be going to Midnight Yell and filming your reaction to it?
I'm not going to go by myself. That's weird.
Well, bring your kids if you want. But
if you're at College Station and you wouldn't mind escorting me to a Midnight Yell, just drop us a line in the comments, shoot us a tweet, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you guys. And I would go to a Midnight Yell, but I'm not going to stumble up on that thing by myself. That's weird. JJ, last words.
I'm just excited for next week as well. I do think this is going to be kind of an uneventful weekend, and I'm just going to start knocking on wood now that Kenny Fudu doesn't kick in 2 weeks.
So there it is. That's the show. This is From the Stands, a college football for fans from fans. Thanks, guys, so much for joining me. Like I said, you can follow us on YouTube. We post shows every Friday throughout the week and mostly Saturdays on Twitter. But come and join us. Drop us a line. Let us know what you want to see. And if you've got a great idea, we'd love to have you on, just like we had Darren Heitner on this week to talk about the Florida legislation. Again, that interview will go up in its entirety on Sunday. Until then, we'll see you next week.